Hello everyone, John here. Welcome back to my channel. Warren Buffett is certainly one of the most successful investors of all times. While he's known for value investing, he has a unique view on cryptocurrency. This video is a collection of the many times he has expressed his feelings on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency over the last few years. Enjoy.
It's not a currency. I mean, it does not meet the test of a currency. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not around in 10 or 20 years.
Why does it not meet the definition of a currency?
Well, because people say, well, I'll sell you goods in Bitcoins, but they change the price of those every time the price of the dollar changes in relation to Bitcoin. They're pricing off the dollar. They could say, well, I'll sell it to you in barrels of oil, but if they every time the price of oil changes, they change the number of barrels you have to have. That's not your oil is not the currency.
Stay away from Bitcoin.
Well, it's a mirage, basically. I mean, it's a method of transmitting money. It's a very effective way of transmitting money, and you can do it anonymously and all that. A check is a way of transmitting money, too. Our checks are worth a whole lot of money just because they can transmit money. Our money orders, you can transmit money by money orders. People do it. I hope Bitcoin becomes a better way of doing it, but you can replicate it a bunch of different ways, and it will be. And the idea that it has some huge intrinsic value is just a joke, in my view.
That's interesting to compare it to those things. Have you thought of that? It's like, yeah, I mean...
That's what it's doing, it's transmitting.
There's something that the checks are actually drawn, you're drawing upon something. It's not the...
You're transmitting money. Yeah, it's dollars on both ends. I mean, from the guy that puts it in.
Right.
Yeah.
What?
Isn't it a ledger? It's a ledger, right? It's an electronic ledger.
Yeah. It's a very fast money order, anonymously. In terms of cryptocurrencies, generally, I can say almost with certainty that they will come to a bad ending. Now, when it happens or how or anything else, I don't know. But I know this, if I could buy long-term puts, if I could buy a 5-year put on every one of the cryptocurrencies, I'd be glad to do it. But I would never short a dime's worth.
Have you thought about trading the futures to take a negative position on Bitcoin?
No. You
would not do that?
No. There's no reason. I get into enough trouble with things I think I know something about. Why in the world should I take a long or short position in something I don't know anything about? So, we don't have to know what cocoa beans are going to do or cryptocurrencies. We just have to focus on 8 or 10 stocks, businesses basically that we think are decent businesses. But I do think I think what's going on definitely will come to a bad ending. I mean, you've got virtually everybody. I have a class. I have 11 schools coming on Friday. The questions will be on Bitcoin, and I won't know the answers.
Although when we sat down, Warren, you did say, I should have announced that we were getting involved in Bitcoin this morning.
Well, that is true. I mean, that would be much more interesting to the audience that we were going to issue a whole series of cryptocurrencies tomorrow. But we aren't, believe me. And we don't own any. We're not short any. We'll never have a position in them. Well, when you buy a farm, you look at the crop every year and what prices are, and you decide whether it was a satisfactory investment. I mean, you look to the asset itself and what it produces for you. When we buy a business, we look at what the business earns and decide how we feel about it in terms of what we paid. But we are buying something that at the end of the period, we not only have what we bought in the first place, but we have something that the asset produced. And when you buy non-productive assets, all you're counting on is whether the next person is going to pay you more because there are even more other next person coming along. But the asset itself is creating nothing. One of the interesting things, for example, is gold. If you go back to the time of Christ and you look at how many hours of labor you had to give up in order to buy an ounce of gold, and you take it forward to now, you'll find the compound rate maybe 1/10 or 2/10 of 1%. And then you have to insure it during that time and make sure somebody doesn't steal it from you and everything. But it doesn't produce anything. And productive assets, you can pay too much for a productive asset. But I bought a farm in the 1980s, and every year look at how much it produced the way of soybeans and corn. And at the end of that period, I've still got the farm, and I've gotten some significant income off of it. Apartment house, operating business. But if you and I buy various cryptocurrencies, they're not going to multiply. They're not going to be a bunch of rabbits sitting there in front of us. They're just going to sit there. And I got to hope next time you get more excited after I bought it from you, and then maybe I'll get more excited and buy it from you. And actually, we could sit in the house by ourselves, and we could keep running up the price between the two of us. But at the end of the time, there's one Bitcoin sitting there, and now we got to find somebody else. And they come to an end. I mean, those.
So, I mean, that's a greater fool theory. That's what you're saying.
Well, yeah, it's buying something because you expect the pool of people who want to buy it because they want to sell it to somebody else will grow, and you know, it's wonderful because it does create a rising price. Does create more buyers, and people think I've got to get in on this, and it's better if they don't understand it. That's the other thing about non-predictable. If you don't understand it, you get much more excited than if you understand it. I mean, if you buy a bond that says it's going to pay you 4% a year, you're not going to get any pleasant surprises. She's going to pay you 4% a year. But if you can have anything you want to imagine, if you just look at something and say that's magic, you can do it with shark's teeth or seashells or anything. And you know, they did it with tulips in the 17th century in Amsterdam, and they'll do it again. I mean, people, they like to speculate. They like to gamble. And if you can get something, particularly if you have something half plausible going on. Mm-hmm. If you had bought gold in 1942 and you say, we might lose the war and we might have to run off to some other country, and, you know, so let's put our assets in gold, you would have less than a penny for every dollar you got from owning stocks. Less than a penny. Now, if somebody calls that a store of value, I mean, I think they're delusionary.
Okay. Andrew has a question, too. Andrew.
Hey, Warren, related to this issue of Bitcoin, you saw that Goldman Sachs just last week announced that they were going to create effectively a trading operation around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular. You've been an investor in Goldman. What do you think of their decision to do that?
Well, they probably think that lots of people are going to get very excited about it. Well, and maybe already are, but they think there's money to be made trading them. I don't think they're expressing an opinion on the ultimate value. I would be very surprised if the top partners of Goldman are selling their Goldman stock and putting it into Bitcoin. But I want to cover this subject now because my friend Charlie will come on at 8 o'clock and there's no telling what he will say.
Well, that's my whole entire point. I do want to ask Charlie about it because I think when he talked about the turds, he was referring to this. He said if you're trading this, it's like watching other people trading turds and deciding you want to get a piece of that.
Well, you're not going to get me to comment on that.
Hopefully Charlie's not awake and not watching right now.
Well, the truth is people do trade on very crazy things over time. You know, imagine people selling their homes to buy a tulip in Amsterdam. If people think they're going to make money the next day, and worse yet, if they think somebody else that they know is going to make money and they aren't going to make money, it just draws people in. You know, I could whisper something on this program, and kind of the more sillier it was, the more it might react, because there's no quantitative limits. If you buy a stock, you say, well, I'll buy it at 15 times earnings, but I won't buy it at 20 times earnings. But when you get into something that doesn't produce anything, you know, there's no checkpoints. There's nothing to reference it to. It's just, it's gone up, so it'll keep going.
Now, I will say, when I was tweeting the things that you and Charlie were saying about this weekend, all I was doing was repeating what you were saying, and people were coming back with some pretty angry comments, including things like, I bought a house buying cryptocurrency. You're outdated on this. They said a lot meaner things, that you don't understand it, so you should shut up about it. You're not.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you're investing, you don't worry whether people say. If I'm investing in Apple, I love the idea of people saying Apple is terrible because I want the stock to go down because they're repurchasing shares and my interest will go up faster. You don't get defensive if you're buying something that produces that. You don't buy a farm and get real defensive if somebody comes along and says you shouldn't buy a farm or something. You say, look, I can watch the crops grow and I can see what I'm selling my crop for at the end, and I'm making 4% or 8% on my investment. You get defensive when you look at this thing and it doesn't do anything. You're just hoping somebody comes along to pay you more tomorrow or the next day, and you're dependent on more people, the mob growing, you know, basically. So those people do get angry. But the person that bought a house with it, I would say they did the very right thing. They sold it.
They sold it and bought something else with it.
Yeah. And I say about buying apples, I don't care whether anybody ever mentions Apple again. I mean, you know, whereas with Bitcoin, people that buy it want to tout it because they want more people to join the crowd. So they want to come on and say, you buy Bitcoin, because they're going to lose money unless the crowd gathers, if the crowd starts dispersing. So they've got every reason in the world to tout it. When I buy Apple, I know that Apple is going to repurchase a lot of shares. So right now, Apple had whatever it did at the quarter, 4,927,000,000 shares, or 923 million, whatever it was. And we own about 5%. But I know I don't have to do a thing. Yeah. And probably in a couple of years, we'll own 6% without laying out another dollar. Well, I love the idea of having 5% go to 6%. And the cheaper the stock is, the more they will get for their money when they're buying it in. So there's just no reason at all for me to encourage other people to buy Apple.
Has your position changed on Bitcoin?
No, I mean, it's too bad, but Bitcoin, it's ingenious, and blockchain is important, but Bitcoin has no unique value at all. It doesn't produce anything. You can stare at it all day, and no little Bitcoins come out or anything like that. It's a delusion, basically.
So we've gone from rat poison squared to a delusion. Well, kind of an upgrade.
Yeah, I don't. Who knows where we'll be next year? But I'm really sorry it happens, because people get their hopes up that something like that is going to change their lives. And it was a very ingenious thing to figure out how to have a limited supply and make it harder more expensive to create them as you go along, and all that sort of thing. But it doesn't. The function. And this is explained to me by people a lot smarter than I am, but they say blockchain does not depend on Bitcoin. And J.P. Morgan is talking about creating their own, JPM, and it'll be worth $1. I mean, it's matched to the dollar to dollar, and I'm sympathetic to people that own it. Well, I would say this: when Justin and 4 friends came, they behaved perfectly, and we had a good 3.5-hour dinner, and the whole thing was a very friendly exchange of ideas. But cryptocurrencies basically have no value, and they don't produce anything. So you can look at your little ledger item for the next 20 years, and it says you've got X of this cryptocurrency or that. It doesn't reproduce. It doesn't deliver. It can't mail you a check. It can't do anything. And what you hope is that somebody else comes along and pays you more money for it later on. But then that person's got the problem. But in terms of value, zero.
So it sounds like he did not change your position.
No, but I didn't change his either. And I had a very pleasant dinner, and those people they behaved more than well. And they gave 4.6, or Justin gave 4.6 million to Glide, and that will buy a lot of meals and provide a lot of beds for people in San Francisco. So I thank him.
He gave you some Bitcoin. What's it feel like to be a Bitcoiner?
I don't have any Bitcoin.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
No.
You don't own Bitcoin?
No, I do not own one. I don't own any cryptocurrency. I never will. And, in the end, I may start a war on currency. Maybe I can create one, and I'll say there's only going to be 21 million of them, and you can have a little ledger sheet from me and everything that says you have it. And you can have it after I die, but you can't do anything with it except sell it to somebody else. And the interesting thing, of course, is that Bitcoin's been out there a long time, and people talked about how it would be used in various kinds of exchange. But none of our companies are doing business in Bitcoin or anything. Bitcoin has been used, I think, to move around a fair amount of money illegally. So the people
or maybe in countries where you have
so the logical move from the introduction of Bitcoin is to go short suitcases, because the money that was taken in suitcases from one country to another, suitcases will probably fall off in demand. I mean, so you can look at that as the economic contribution of Bitcoin to the society as a